It's 8:52 here in New York. I'm Bryant Gumbel. We understand that there has been a plane crash on the southern tip of Manhattan. You're looking at the World Trade Center. We understand that a plane has crashed into the World Trade Center.
I can hear you. I can hear you. The rest of the world hears you.
We vowed to never forget the 2,996 people killed that day. Tonight, we pause to remember them.
"9/11. Always remember."
It's still dark in Des Moines on Tuesday, September 11th, 2001, when two Saudi nationals passed through security at the Portland, Maine International Jet Port.
This is the first step in a massive terror plot. 9 hijackers are about to board 4 planes at 3 different airports.
7:59 a.m. American Airlines Flight 11 takes off from Boston bound for Los Angeles, almost 15 minutes late, with 92 people on board, including 5 terrorists. 14 minutes after takeoff, those 5 men gain control of the aircraft. At 8:46 local time, they fly that plane into One World Trade Center, the North Tower.
8:14 a.m. United Airlines Flight 175, also almost 15 minutes behind schedule and also headed for LA from Boston. The plane carries 9 crew members and 56 passengers. 5 of those passengers are hijackers. At approximately 8:45, right as Flight 11 impacts the North Tower, Flight 175 is overtaken by the hijackers. 9:03, the Boeing 767 collides with 2 World Trade Center, the South Tower. 8:20 a.m., American Airlines Flight 77 from Washington Dulles Airport to Los Angeles takes off 10 minutes late. There are 64 passengers and crew on board. 5 hijackers gain control of the plane over southern Ohio and turn back to the east. 9:37 a.m., the terrorists send the jet crashing into the west side of the Pentagon.
8:42 a.m., just before Flight 11 hits the North Tower, United Airlines Flight 93 leaves Newark, New Jersey 42 minutes late. Bound for San Francisco, the plane carries 45 passengers and crew and 4 hijackers. At 9:28, those 4 men storm the cockpit. At 9:30, passengers and crew members start making phone calls to loved ones and airline officials.
At 9:57, knowing what had happened in New York and Washington, D.C., the passengers of Flight 93 revolt, attempting to break into the cockpit with a food cart. It's ultimately not known if they were successful, but family members believe the passengers breached the cockpit and were fighting to regain control of the airplane. At 10:03, the Boeing 757 crashes into an empty field in Somerset County, Pennsylvania, near Shanksville.
Within 3 hours of the Flight 11 crash into One World Trade Center, both towers collapse. A large section of the Pentagon is destroyed, and a gaping hole is ripped into a Pennsylvania field.
The worst terror attack in American history was over, and a new reality was beginning.
Tonight, we're going to explore the swell of patriotism 9/11 inspired, talk with the brother of a victim, and with a former New York City police detective.
We are also going to look back and remember those minutes and hours and what they were like here in Iowa.
Anyone who worked at KCCI in the 1990s and 2000s knew that if you turned on the TV and saw Kevin and Molly Cooney anchoring together, you should probably get to work as soon as possible. And that's what all of us did that day.
This is KCCI News Channel 8. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Kevin is joining me on this very, very unimaginable day. Two unimaginable attacks, one in New York, another in Washington, D.C., have collapsed the World Trade Center buildings in which 50,000 people work, set fire to the Pentagon, along with 4 hijacked passenger planes. A day that is still unfolding, a day that is still incomprehensible.
We have complete coverage of what is easily the deadliest terrorist attack ever to happen on U.S. soil.
Former KCCI anchors Molly and Kevin Cooney began our September 11th local coverage on the New News. By this point, the term 9/11 had not yet become the world's name for that horrific day.
I looked up and I saw the second plane hit. Had to be a commercial-sized airliner.
What went through your mind?
That it couldn't be real.
Throughout the morning, Network News was on the air showing minute-by-minute coverage of the terrorist attack, but KCCI had a story to tell here in central Iowa. The impact was enormous, practically and emotionally. From the airport closing to horrified downtown workers watching the story unfold, Iowans could not believe what had happened. One of our first stops was the downtown Federal Building.
The Federal Building was shut down at 10 o'clock this morning, and security has been heightened. You can also see over my shoulder here, the flags have been lowered to half staff after this national tragedy. Employees were told to go home, everything from the IRS to Social Security to the court system here.
The fear was all federal institutions might be under attack.
It is unsettling to know that the terrorism could happen here in Des Moines.
The Des Moines airport is essentially shut down. As you can see behind me, it looks pretty deserted.
Reporter Michelle Parker headed to the airport. Planes flying across the country were ordered to land. Many passengers gathered around our TV set in the terminal to see the first live pictures of the attack. Their faces tell the story. They were in shock.
I think we need to pray for our country and pray for our president because, this is the national crisis that people have been talking about for years.
Nothing was said. We just simply landed, everyone, and only after we got off did we find out what's happening. So obviously we're kind of shocked right now.
They said that we had to land, all planes in the air had to land. He didn't say why.
Right now we are not going to check any passengers or bags in.
And that created short-term chaos at the Des Moines International Airport.
But at this point, the airport is being shut down. The terminal is being evacuated.
A very, very unusual, if not surreal, scene here at the state capitol today.
Reporter Jeff Greenwood was live at the State House, which went into lockdown. Iowa State Patrol guards checked everyone who wanted to come in. Governor Tom Vilsack tried to show a brave face.
This is a time when every single American unites. When that occurs, there is no force in the world more powerful.
Students that I talk to all say the same thing. They are shocked. They are amazed that this could happen in the United States.
Reporter Chris Nagus showed us how students at Iowa State University headed to NETV to watch the news.
Some of them were visibly shaken. They were crying. They were upset. People were already starting to pray for the victims.
You're just in shock. You don't know how to feel.
Eric Hansen found the same story at Southeast Polk Schools.
At classrooms all across central Iowa, lesson plans are going out the window and televisions are being turned on. It's a time to watch history in the making.
It's unfathomable. It's big.
Mr. Knoller's freshman social studies class was supposed to have a test during 5th period. Instead, the TV came on and the students were glued.
The noon bells rang today at St. Ambrose in downtown Des Moines.
Many downtown workers headed to church to pray.
I think prayer is the only tool that we have to help get us through times like this.
And then at 10:28 a.m. Eastern Time, the second tower of the World Trade Center collapsed.
Employees at American Republic Insurance stopped working and watched TVs set up around the building.
I think it's very big. I think it's very scary. It makes us all very vulnerable to what can happen any place in the world.
We are live in West Des Moines. We're at the blood center, where as you can see, there's a long line of people waiting to give blood here.
I stopped by the blood center on September 11th, where we found lines around the block. Sadly, as we discovered later, there was very little need for blood.
Americans should come together because this is probably the biggest thing since Pearl Harbor or Kennedy being shot. So I hope people put that in perspective and get down here and give blood.
Eric, please set the scene for us down there. What's going on?
Well, Steve and Cynthia, the line is very long here. We are on Southeast 1st Street and Jackson Avenue here in Des Moines, and this is just one example of the line of people lining up to try to get in and get gas.
And Eric Hansen found many drivers panicked on that scary day, worried about rumored gas outages.
It's probably going to get anywhere from $3 to $6 per gallon. That's what I heard.
But you can see chaos.
That never happened. The saddest part of our coverage came when we learned of Iowans who died. The first, Iowa native Karen Kincaid, an attorney who was on the plane that crashed into the Pentagon.
Since so many Seabury Smith employees travel to New York City from week to week, the terrorist attack hits very close to home.
And we learned that an employee of the West Des Moines-based Seabury & Smith, Jim Cleary, was killed when one of the World Trade Center towers collapsed on his hotel.
I mean, it's just horrific. I mean, it is unthinkable. And the fact that we do have coworkers and friends who are in the World Trade Center, it just really brings it, right to home.
Todd mentioned two of the Iowans killed that day, Karen Kincaid and Jim Cleary.
We will be remembering all the Iowans who died in New York and Washington, D.C. throughout our program tonight.
There were a lot of those that were proud to be there and ready to go.
Ready to fight and paying the price. Next, one veteran's experience and his thoughts on the current events in Afghanistan. Craig Amundsen grew up in Anamosa. He lived in Dubuque before he moved to Washington, D.C. with his wife and two children. The University of Iowa graduate was a multimedia illustrator for the United States Army. He was killed when Flight 77 crashed into the Pentagon. Craig Amundsen's service may have ended that day at the Pentagon, but for many people, September 11th was a call to duty.
As Todd Magel showed us earlier, Eric Hansen covered this story from a Central Iowa classroom where he watched patriotism swell before his eyes. He revisited those feelings with Army Sergeant Major Todd Epperly, who saw firsthand what 9/11 inspired.
20 years ago, on a Tuesday morning, a gut-punched nation sat, stunned.
The loss of life is expected to be catastrophic.
Staring at any TV they could find, shocked.
I thought up to this point a terrorist attack in the U.S. was going to be minor.
1,000 miles from ground zero was too close to home, but it was also too far away.
There's not much you can do when you're sitting around and watching it on TV, so I thought this would be a way to help.
So, feeling helpless, Americans prayed and cried and rallied around their colors.
What's so proud? I think there was a lot of fear, a lot of anger, disbelief.
And even more, patriotism.
We're passing out red shirts for the red part of the flag.
Plenty waved flags. 6,000 Iowans created a human one.
It's a way to do something, and you want to do something.
While teenagers who couldn't even pronounce the enemy's name
Osama bin Laden
signed up to wear the flag on a uniform.
I'm ready to go over to Pakistan, Afghanistan, wherever it's at. I'm ready to go over there and serve my country and show them what's up, you know?
We wanted to defend ourselves.
Todd Epperly had already been wearing the uniform for more than a decade, but now admits before 9/11, it was for the money.
We started having more people joining for, I like to say, for the right reasons. People joining that they wanted to fight for their country.
He suddenly wanted to fight too. 18 months later, he got his wish.
March!
But in Afghanistan, Todd also got a bullet.
It was going to be our last mission.
Through his leg, out his hip. 2 in his unit died.
Yeah, it was lucky for me, but I really, it was my team.
That patriotism became personal.
First, I want to thank my wife for everything she's done for me.
Now, 20 years after 9/11, with Afghanistan back in the headlines,
and I still think of it every day, especially with things like this that's going on.
The sergeant major who still serves in the Army Reserves pictures the Afghans he worked with in schools and police stations.
They're scared to death. They want to get their family out.
Like his interpreter, who now lives in Washington.
It is. Yeah, it is frustrating because we knew that Afghanistan is only going to change so much.
So under the flag he still fights for, the officer with deep patriotism, personal connections, and military brothers who didn't come home admits.
And it is difficult that, one of my friends that I served with lost his life, actually 2 of them that I was with. And now it's like, was it, like you said right there, was it worth it?
And he wonders if fresh-faced enlistees will be as quick to sign up.
I'm just hoping that a lot of them don't see, well, there's really no reason to do this because we go in and we try to help build this nation, and then once we leave, it just goes back the way it was.
20 years has been filled with difficult headlines. Retired Colonel Robert King delivered plenty.
They're heroes. They're our friends, people we've served with.
As the face of the National Guard whenever an Iowan died.
They were hard.
But he still sees the colors flying and believes a politically divided country overwhelmingly supports the uniform.
While we have different opinions on how things could have been handled in the last several weeks, people still care.
Todd Epperly does.
You stand taller wearing that uniform. It's something I'm very proud of.
Even 20 years after that Tuesday that changed everything.
Let's pray that there's never another 9/11 that causes that kind of calamity that brings out causes everybody to rush downtown and buy a flag.
More than 2,300 U.S. service members died serving in Afghanistan after 9/11. Another 4,400 died during Operation Iraqi Freedom. Both wars resulted in more than 52,000 military members being wounded in action.
Those numbers don't include the 189 people who were either on Flight 77 or, like Craig Amundsen, were killed when the plane crashed into the Pentagon. Mary Ray Soper was a gymnast at Iowa State University. The former attorney was on her way to take over as the head coach of the gymnastics program at UC Santa Barbara. Karen Kincaid grew up in Waverly. She was an attorney who was on her way to Los Angeles for a conference related to the pro bono work she did for people in need of organ transplants.
Sandra Teague graduated from Des Moines University in 1988 and worked as a physical therapist in Washington, D.C. Flight 77 was the first leg in her dream adventure to Australia.
In 1995, Musco Lighting responded to the Oklahoma City bombing, providing lights to support the search, rescue, and recovery. 6 years later, watching the events unfold on television, Musco co-founder Joe Crookham knew his team could help again.
I'd never seen anything like that, and obviously the world hasn't seen very many things like that.
On that terrible morning, New York City firefighter Stephen Siller had just finished his shift, but he went back on duty to help. In all the chaos, Siller strapped on his gear and ran through the tunnel to the Twin Towers, where he lost his life saving others. Coming up, Marcus McIntosh talks with a former New Yorker about how Siller's sacrifice is still remembered 20 years later. Jim Cleary was at the World Trade Center for a meeting. The Newton native worked for Seabury and Smith, a division of Marsh and McLennan. Jim is survived by his wife Jean and 2 adult sons.
Michael Tinley also worked for Marsh and McLennan. The former Council Bluffs resident called his sister at 7:47 that morning from the 100th floor of the One World Trade Center building to say he could see her apartment building in Tribeca. The rescue and recovery efforts at the World Trade Center site where those Iowans died went on until May of 2002, made possible in large part because of an Iowa company. For decades, Oskaloosa-based Musco Lighting has lit some of the biggest events and landmarks around the world. In our country, the Lady Liberty to Mount Rushmore, football fields and Major League Baseball stadiums, Little League fields to the Field of Dreams. After the attack on America, Musco provided a shining light on a very dark time.
Our 4 trucks down to the site, literally right at ground zero. I mean, we were right on the pile.
4 Musco mobile lighting trucks used to light college football games and movie sets were now lighting a desperate mission to find survivors of a terrorist attack. Just the night before, crews from the Oskaloosa-based company had been lighting the Gravity Games in Rhode Island, less than 4 hours away. One phone call that Tuesday morning set things in motion.
Called out there and caught up with the guys. They were having breakfast and talked to them about it, said not telling you what to do because it's really a very tough situation, dangerous thing, and I don't know any more about it than anybody else does, but I think we could be helpful to them, and it's up to you guys to decide what you want to do about it.
They left their breakfast sitting on the table, got in their trucks, and headed to New York City. Meanwhile, 2 Musco mobile lighting trucks leave Oskaloosa at noon on 9/11, headed for the Pentagon.
Didn't have final clearance yet, but we got it en route, and then they went directly right down to the Pentagon.
At the Pentagon in Washington, D.C., the damage caused by the plane crash was limited to the building. But Ground Zero in New York was massive.
The debris, the dust was 2 feet deep, and I mean, it was a horrific sight.
The Twin Towers and another skyscraper had collapsed, and many other buildings were heavily damaged or destroyed.
We had several trucks that blew tires on the way in there because there was so much debris. So they were literally driving on the rims to get to the site set up in order to be able to put the lights on.
When the wind would blow through, it kicked up all that ash, caking everything.
We've seen that through the equipment, having to keep clean air filters, in the generators and the trucks and stuff like that, but also at the same time, make sure our team members were safe.
The working conditions were life-threatening.
You got a concern that a building's going to fall down and hit you, or the air or something, you can't really breathe well and everything, and you're trying to figure out how to do what needs to be done.
Spotty cell phone service made communication a struggle.
There was no way for us to talk the techs. Once they got down to Ground Zero, they basically were on their own.
Add in the problems created when city, state, and federal agencies who are all responding and have no way to coordinate their efforts.
The difficulty in anybody being able to make decisions was just amazing.
9 days later, Crookham and his management team were able to visit the Pentagon and Ground Zero.
It was a very smoky, smelly, eerie feeling or whatever when I first got on site.
They had watched the scenes on television.
The sight of everything was just overwhelming. It's even hard to describe today.
It hardly captured the reality.
Just the smell of it was just a burnt.
The glass in the streets, you saw people's personal effects from their offices where you saw pencils, it was just heartbreaking to think of what all had gone on and what those people were dealing with.
A place was cleaned out to park a truck, to put up in the air, to build it, to light it, and right beside it was a car flipped upside down, and the ashes and the windows were broken out of vehicles. There was burnt fire trucks. There was just buses. It was just a really different feeling, and it was something you just won't ever forget.
It was months of physically and emotionally draining work for the crews on site and those working together in Iowa. The team at Musco was proud to do it.
Every American wanted to help. We all wanted to do something. We all wanted to participate. We all wanted to make it better. And we were very fortunate to figure out a way to do that.
The tall booms of the Musco trucks provided light in a dark time. They became something much more special in honoring a request by the New York Fire Department.
They wanted to be able to show symbolism, and our booms was the tallest thing that was structurally sound at Ground Zero, so they asked us to fly the flag.
A beacon of pride and hope, and later, tattered and ash-covered, a symbol of the hell they survived.
The stress and the struggle that everybody was dealing with on a minute-by-minute, hour-by-hour basis out there at that point in time, I'd never seen anything like that, and obviously the world hasn't seen very many things like that.
The Musco mobile lighting trucks arrived at the World Trade Center the night of 9/11. They would stay on site until the following May. Musco's mobile lighting trucks were needed at the Pentagon for 3 weeks. In all, 45 to 50 Musco crew members were working those sites.
Musco lighting was an enormous help to New York police officers like Louis Savelli. When we come back, Cynthia Fodor talks with the former New York City police detective turned Iowa pizza maker about what he doesn't remember about 9/11.
Trying to sift through tons and tons of rubble by hand, trying to find people, and then just being frustrated of not really finding anything.
Hundreds of New York firefighters and police officers immediately headed to work once Flight 175 hit the South Tower. One of those officers was Louis Savelli.
After standing up the New York Police Department's counterterrorism unit in the aftermath of the attack and leading it for many years, Savelli moved here to Iowa in 2014. Cynthia Fodor caught up with him to talk about what he remembers and doesn't remember from those terrible days in New York City.
This is basically the Brooklyn Bridge.
We first introduced you to Louis Savelli when this born and bred New Yorker moved his family to Iowa to make a fresh start, opening an authentic pizzeria in 2014. He brought a little of the Big Apple with him: posters, pizza ovens, and his prized accent.
We've been here about 2 or 3 months. We haven't had a car broken into, not even once. We haven't had anybody ask us for money on the street. So we're liking it.
The retired detective came to Camp Dodge with lessons learned from 9/11 to teach counter-terrorist training to law enforcement all over the country.
That was my unit, was the terrorism interdiction unit for several years to arrest members of Al-Qaeda.
Savelli led NYPD's counter-terrorism unit, created after September 11th, 2001.
When the second plane had hit, which I knew right away, and then everybody knew right away that that was a terrorist attack. I ran right into work.
A life-changing day burned into his mind.
And it was just like mayhem. The streets of New York were mayhem. People were driving all over trying to get places. Nobody was stopping at lights. Horns were beeping. It was something out of like a movie, like a science fiction movie.
Savelli captured the unimaginable horror of Ground Zero in these photos.
It was just constant dust for quite a while from all the debris, the pulverization of the buildings, all the stuff that was in the air. It was very surreal.
He remembers working frantically,
trying to sift through tons and tons of rubble by hand, trying to find people, and then just being frustrated of not really finding anything.
Searching for survivors, but finding few.
A lot of the memories of specific things are kind of like blurry or non-existent. So a lot of things that happened, it's very hard to remember specific things, but I do remember my recovery efforts at Ground Zero were mostly body parts. And it's kind of hard to say on TV or anything, but I don't remember an entire person, finding an entire person on that day on 9/11 and then throughout that time. So I assume that maybe that's part of not remembering. Maybe it's part of my mind blocking it out.
Now, 20 years later, he cannot block it out. Like many of the first responders, Savelli, too, is suffering. The gray dust in the air he breathed on the front lines then, causing asthma, skin cancer, and gut-wrenching stomach pain now.
Sadly, all those guys that had stayed there every day looking for people and looking for DNA and anybody that could have at least recover something for the family. Every one of them has gotten seriously sick. I think it's about 5,000 total of the first responders have died of cancer, and about 20,000 have gotten some sort of serious cancer-related disease since then.
Add to the pain fears reignited on this 20th anniversary that terrorism will rear its ugly head on our soil once again.
With pulling out of Afghanistan, Louis, I'm just wondering your thoughts on how concerned do we need to be today still about these terrorist groups?
Without a doubt that we are much more at risk today than we've been in a long time. Are we going to have people like Taliban or ISIS or Al-Qaeda or the Haqqani Network or some others coming in with them? And there's no doubt about that's going to happen. So we have to do a better job.
Today, Savelli is doing 2 jobs, running 2 pizza restaurants in Des Moines and his security firm, aptly named Homefront Protective Group.
I was a member of the NYPD on 9/11 at Ground Zero, and we did our job, but the United States military sacrificed so much to go overseas to protect this country, and they are my heroes.
This picture he took of a fire truck smashed with our flag still standing is symbolic of the resilient American spirit after this crushing blow.
If there's anything I could think that we should remember is that there's people out there that sacrifice for very little money. The cops, the firefighters, the military, the EMTs, they make very little money. but yet they risk their lives out there for strangers.
An officer who lived through 9/11, taking all he learned from 9/11, still standing strong to keep our country safe in the post-9/11 world.
So let's remember all those people that we've lost and all the people that are out there still fighting the fight.
23 New York police officers and 343 New York firefighters died on 9/11, trying to save those Iowans and thousands more.
KCCI's Marcus McIntosh spoke with the former New Yorker who was just blocks from the terrorist attacks that forever changed this country and the New York City skyline.
Walked up Broadway and saw where the first plane had hit.
Matthew Shearer grew up in Brooklyn, New York, and was living there on September 11th of 2001. Working at the New York Stock Exchange about 4 blocks from the second tower. Originally thinking a plane into the first tower was a tragic accident.
Turned around and went back to Wall Street, and that's when the second plane hit, and that changed everything.
Shearer says time all but stood still as they were grabbed by security and ushered back into the Stock Exchange building.
The second plane coming in was slow motion. We could hear it coming over, and they hustled us into the building, but in my mind it's all very slow.
His thoughts focusing on family, especially his father Richard, who at the time was the director of New York City's Office of Emergency Management, coordinating rescue efforts caught on camera by a French documentary crew.
And I need that done now.
Efforts by all first responders involved that are honored nationwide every September 11th during the Tunnel to Towers 5K run and walk.
I've run it a bunch of times. It's really moving.
Tunnel to Towers started in New York City after firefighter Stephen Siller, who on September 11, 2001 had finished his shift but went back on duty to help. Not able to drive through the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel, he strapped on his gear and ran through the tunnel to the Twin Towers, where he lost his life saving others.
It's an important day, but I think the sense of community coming together with first responders is really important.
For Shearer, it's hard to believe 20 years has passed. He says there is a dramatic difference in how his day started 2 decades ago.
When I came out of the subway that morning for work, it was a crystal clear blue sky.
And what he saw after leaving the Stock Exchange building.
As soon as I exited, it was just out of a movie. Taxi cab stopped, doors open, like people just scrambled, dust everywhere. And I just started heading north, and you get past this point where the sky opens up and it's a crystal clear blue sky, and you turn around and it's just darkness, it's just black, and the clouds, the billowing smoke from the tower collapse.
A 5K run and walk nationwide shines the light on first responders. Locally, the Tunnel to Towers event starts Saturday, September 11th at 8:30 a.m. outside Fire Station Number 1 in Ankeny. You can go to t2t.org and search Ankeny for more details. Tim Haviland's family went to Ground Zero in the weeks after the attack.
They did, and when they returned from the visit, his brother told us what it was like.
It was like going to a battlefield where your brother died. But my brother wasn't a soldier. He was going to work.
Tim Haviland was another Marsh & McLennan employee. The project manager was a former Ames resident who worked on the 96th floor of One World Trade Center. He left behind his wife and her 2 children. Tim also had parents, 2 brothers, and a sister who made a journey to the World Trade Center site shortly after the terror attacks.
Steve Haviland documented that trip and shared it and his feelings with us when they returned. This story originally aired November 15th, 2001.
Two airplanes have crashed into the World Trade Center.
My mother called and said, "Steve, turn on the television. The World Trade Center's on fire. That's where your brother works." And at first I was kind of like, the World Trade Center on fire? You know, what are you talking about? In about 5 to 10 minutes, I was greatly concerned about what was going on. Then the buildings fell, and my parents were holding out hope that he wasn't in the buildings. I said, we need to be realistic here. Tim's probably not going to make it through this. And we all agreed that, you know, chances were looking pretty slim. I lost a brother. And it didn't really sink in, the whole magnitude of the event, the whole thing that my brother's dead. I just started bawling. it really hit me. And it was strange because I knew the whole nation mourned the loss. Tim was 41, and you're supposed to grow old with your siblings. You're not supposed to watch them die. The hardest part of the whole thing is my family won't be whole anymore. I wouldn't say we were close, but at the same time, we weren't distant either. I really wanted to close up that gap and better understand him and find out what he did on an everyday basis and try to understand what his world was like. Tomorrow morning we're going to go down to Ground Zero. The sun coming up over the burned out building, first in line directly in front of the Trade Center. Going to Ground Zero was, I mean, I'll never erase that from my memory. It's like a huge bomb just went off. And the stench of it all is very hard to get over. And it's everywhere. I mean, right from when we got off the subway about 5 blocks away, you just followed your nose. It was definitely different. I mean, it was a different feeling because you knew you were in the area. So it was kind of like, oh, you know, it was heavy. I mean, I just kind of like, oh, and as you approach it, you get closer and closer. It's kind of like, you know, it's one of those things you know you have to do. But at the same time, it's a very sad occasion. And going there made it much more real to me. There was no, watching it on TV is one thing. Seeing it with your own eyes and smelling it and all, it's very powerful. I really can't describe the feeling of going down there and just, you know, seeing this great ruin. It was just overwhelming. My brother was in the first tower that was hit. What's left of the first tower is the shell of one side that's leaning up against another building. There's nothing left. This is one of the devastated buildings still standing, which will obviously come down. And my father he just didn't care to go down there. And my parents didn't go. But my other siblings went down there. And Bruce and I were the only two who got in to actually see the site, to get right up front and personal. It was very powerful. And then walking in, as you leave, it's almost like you leave the city and walk into a different area. And, you know, and you're not supposed to cry. As you can see, they're still pouring water on the fire. I mean, the towers are down. That's where he worked. That's where he died. And that's where he's buried. It was much the same as visiting a gravesite. It's just incredible, you know, to walk around and to understand. It was like going to a battlefield where your brother died. But my brother wasn't a soldier. He was going to work. And it's one of the most amazing sights in the world. And that's where my brother's ashes are. And I want to pay my last respects to him. As I was walking out, my brother Bruce put his arm around me, and we kind of walked out together and cried. The police officer said on the way back, we thanked him, and somebody made a comment about their heroism. And he stopped, and he looked at us and said, "I'm not the hero, your brother's the hero." I guess I was hoping to find a better understanding of my brother, and I achieved that. I feel really good about that. But I don't know, it's a trip I needed to make. I didn't know how badly I needed to make it till I got home. And it leaves my mind at peace. I feel like a little part of me is there now. It's an eerie spot. I think it would be eerie for anyone, but it was very eerie to see the area where my brother was buried. I needed to go there. I needed to see it. I can't make sense of it all. You know, the question why is just gonna linger forever.
Something we have heard repeatedly is just how crystal blue the sky was on 9/11. Now, part of the reason was all the flights in the United States were grounded following Flight 77 impacting the Pentagon.
That meant some U.S.-bound planes were forced to land at Gander International Airport in Newfoundland, Canada, 1,400 miles from New York City. Gander, a small city of 9,000, welcomed 39 planes carrying nearly 6,600 passengers and crew. Bree Jackson from KCCI's Washington Bureau tells us the kindness the residents showed sparked an international movement.
Hi, how you doing? Good. I'm here to see Captain Stanislaw.
A delivery of donuts from Steptoe Law Firm to firefighters at the Arlington, Virginia firehouse near the Pentagon.
Good morning. I'm here to drop off some breakfast tacos for Pay It Forward 9/11.
A surprise breakfast delivery for a dentist office in Austin, Texas.
Hello. We wanted to give you this as a gift.
And a gift to keep an ICU team going at George Washington University Hospital in Washington, D.C.
A little something to pay it forward.
This is Pay It Forward 9/11, a movement to spread the kindness and unity that helped shine light in the darkness of terrorism.
Our motivation is to give little gifts out just so the next person can then pay it forward and appreciate a little bit of humanity.
Connor Ferry felt that humanity at only 6 years old, stranded in tiny Gander, Newfoundland. His plane and 38 others sought refuge there as U.S. air traffic was stalled. People in Gander rallied to care for the group of strangers that nearly doubled their population.
How hard they worked and how little sleep some of them got. It really kind of boosts my faith in humanity, I guess, a little bit.
I didn't know if Gander was in Iceland or Canada, but I soon found out it was one of the most magical places on Earth.
Kevin Turf was also grounded in Gander. He's the man behind the Pay It Forward 9/11 movement, inspired by the compassion he experienced.
It was the first time I've ever had to rely on the kindness of a stranger to give me a pillow to lay my head. They opened their homes, their churches, their schools, and turned everything into a giant emergency shelter. The definition of compassion is to engage in the suffering of others. And so that was my takeaway, is that the world needs more compassion.
The mission is simple. Every year leading up to or on 9/11, do a good deed for someone and challenge them to pay it forward.
We were meant to help each other, and so my hope is that we can begin to restore unity one random act of kindness at a time.
We encourage you to take part by doing a good deed to help someone else every year on September 11th or any other day in honor of those we lost and those who showed kindness. Share it on social media with the hashtag PayItForward9/11.
That day was unlike any national emergency or tragedy because we watched it happen in real time. The country stopped and turned to the television to try to understand what was happening in silence.
When we come back, Stacy and I and several others share our memories of that day. Our job was to go to the airport because flights were directed to land at the closest available airport. They wanted everybody out of the sky. The government wanted the skies clear. We knew we had to get inside the airport and we had to talk to the people coming off of those airplanes. And the first plane we met, the people who were coming off of that first plane that landed, flew out of Logan Airport in Boston. And we, Courtney and I, were the first people to tell the folks coming off of that plane what had happened. That the Twin Towers had been hit by planes in New York City, and everybody's heart just sank. And so all of those people and the people who were coming off of the other planes scurried over to the bar, and everybody gathered around those television sets. It was an overflow crowd, and everybody just watched the TV in total disbelief.
And the one thing I will remember that day that'll never leave me is the pictures of the people who were watching TV. We had a TV at the airport. We visited companies that put up TVs, schools, and it was just the horror of the people's faces watching this unfold that we captured that will tell the story almost as good as the video from New York. It was just this sort of wide-eyed horror that they had on their face watching this terrible event.
It's stunning to me that it's been 20 years since that awful day. It was a beautiful day, gorgeous weather, and it didn't seem like it was the appropriate backdrop for the horrible thing that had happened in Pennsylvania and Washington, D.C. and New York. I was working for a television station in Charlottesville, Virginia on 9/11, 2 hours south of the Pentagon. It was a scary day, a scary time for everyone. We didn't know what was happening. We didn't know what was going to happen next. We sent a reporter and a photographer to the Pentagon to cover that part of the story. And when they returned, you could just see it on their face. And they told us that what we were seeing on television couldn't even capture the extent of the damage that you see in person. People were scared. People were quiet. The silence was almost deafening.